So, we talk a lot about the fact that the left owns the culture. The left owns the culture in this country. They own the academies, they own the Hollywood, they own the news, most of the major news outlets. But the people are the culture. And that means that this culture war that we're fighting is a war between a very small minority of people who own outlets and us, we the people, because we are the culture. And you can see it. I do want to talk about Tom Wolfe for a minute before we get to all the other news. Tom Wolfe died. He was 88, I believe. One of our great novelists. And one of the reasons he was, and not just a great novelist, he was a great writer. He was a great man of letters. I think that's really important to put it that way, because he started out doing journalism, and he did this new journalism, was filled with slang and all capital letters and exclamation marks. But it was journalism. And what he realized, along with Truman Capote and Norman Mailer, was he realized that when we live in this incredible media world, the truth has become our story. It used to be that, the story about the king, you would never really hear the story about the king, so you told stories about kings. But now our kings are on TV. We see them every day. Our leaders are operating right in front of us, and within a year, you find out everything. And so what these guys realized was that reality had become the new fiction. And so Wolfe wrote with that insight, and also he understood, as Stephen King would understand, I think a little bit later than he did, he understood that even though he himself was a cultured man, a deeply cultured, deeply educated man, he understood that American culture is not based on Homer. It's not based on the great classical literature. It is based on comic books and populars. He realized that the people were the culture. He realized that our culture comes from this vibrant group of people, not all of whom are well-read, not all of whom are, elites. And he put that language into what he wrote. And he was a conservative. There is simply no getting around this. He wrote, Roger Kimball was writing about this in the Wall Street Journal today. It's a really good piece if you get a chance to look at it. But he understood, he made fun of the liberals during the 60s who would host parties for Black Panthers who essentially wanted to kill them. It was like, I think it was called Mau Mau and the Flatcatchers or something like this. He made fun of the modern art world. One of my favorite things he did was he talked about how modern art was just theory and it was an actual representation of real life. And he was very committed to the representation of real life. Even when he started writing novels, he would go off and research them just as he would journalism, because he wanted to write novels in the tradition of Zola and Dickens with a kind of journalistic flair. And while, like all artists, he criticized our culture, because artists do that. They find the things that are about human beings that are wrong. He didn't attack our culture, which is two different things. Let me just show you one instance of what I mean, but between the difference. You can do it with just looking at Tom Wolfe, between the difference of an artist who is culture critical, who is seeing the flaws in human beings, the sinful nature of human beings, and how they're operating in this moment, in this time, and somebody who hates the culture that he is operating in, okay? Bonfire of the Vanities, which was a very, very, really good book. I didn't like the last third of it as much as everybody else, but I thought it was a really beautiful book, a reinvention of the Zola Dickens kind of social novel that had gone out of style. And it's about a stockbroker in the Reagan era when the stocks were taking off and everybody was making so much money and nobody actually knew what stockbrokers did. And very early on in the book, he hits and runs over a black guy, a black kid, and hides it and covers it up. And that's the story. And it's really an insightful and in parts an absolutely brilliant book. But when it comes to the moral reckoning in the book, the judge at the trial is a Jew. And the reason he does this, and it's very, very obvious in the book, is he's telling you that the foundation of our moral life is based on Judeo-Christian principles. That is why he's doing it. That is why the judge is a Jew. It's the same thing in The Sopranos. In The Sopranos, there's a scene where Mrs. Soprano goes to a Jewish psychiatrist, and he says to her, the problem you have is that your husband is evil. And he just clears everything up. He just says, these are the values that we live by. You're violating them. Same with the judge in Tom Wolfe's novel, Bonfire of the Vanities. Now, in the movie, the judge became Morgan Freeman. No one would argue with that casting. Morgan Freeman's a great, great actor, and he sure as hell looks like a judge. But But the difference is the difference between liberals who feel that our moral center is the violation of our principles in black slavery and in black prejudice, which is a violation of our principles, and Tom Wolfe, who felt, yes, the culture is unfair to black people, as we could see in this story, although he made incredible fun out of, what's his name, the Reverend Al Sharpton Jr. But he said, yes, there are inequalities, but our culture is based on a Judeo-Christian basis that is valid and remains valid. You can here's the scene from the movie with Morgan Freeman Jr., where they call him a racist, and of course he's black, so they can't get away with that. But his voice is a biblical voice. His voice is a biblical voice as he criticizes the culture, but he represents the best of the culture. Here it is.
You dare call me racist? Well, I say unto you, what does it matter the color of a man's skin if witnesses perjure themselves? If a prosecutor enlists the perjurers? When a district attorney throws a man to the mob for political gain? And men of the cloth, men of God, take the prime cuts. Is that justice?
See, it's the voice of the culture. Because it's Tom Wolfe, it's the voice of the culture condemning the people in the culture, which is much different than condemning the culture. And again, I'm not criticizing the casting of Morgan Freeman as a judge. Obviously, who wouldn't cast Morgan Freeman as a judge? But just the fact that the liberals could not get their mind around putting a Jew as the judge, which is the statement that Tom Wolfe is making in the book, tells you something about the difference of how they look at our culture and how Tom Wolfe and conservative artists. And it's really interesting that some of our greatest artists from the 60s, which you can see as the time when the left took over the culture, are right-wingers. Tom Stoppard, the other Tom, one of the greatest writers alive, also a Maggie Thatcher guy, and really got nailed for it. And we're going to see how this operates, how the culture, those who create the culture are at war with the real culture of America in all the politics that's happening today. But this is the whole thing. The left is not culture critical. They are at war with the people, and the people are the culture. The people create the culture. It is the job of artists simply to reflect that culture and to see how people violate the premises of that culture. That was the voice you heard. Those were the words you heard Morgan Freeman saying. Verily I say unto you, he was talking in that biblical voice, that men of God have violated the precepts of God, as opposed to what the left is saying, there is no God. The precepts themselves stink. And how do you see it? It's always the Jews. It always comes down to the Jews. Why? Because they stand at the core of our culture. They stand at the core of what we believe and who we are. And their Bible does, and their Messiah does. And I know that Jews don't accept Jesus as the Messiah, but he is still the representative of Jewish ideas and was, lived and died a Jew. You just see this in so many ways. I mean, you have these terrorists, Hamas, attacking the Israeli borders. And I know we've been talking about this for days, so I won't go into it forever because it just goes on. And the press just basically acting as if this must be the Jews' fault. That, by the way, is a big part of Western culture. That's the part of Western culture the left represents, blaming the Jews for everything. Let's just take a look at Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, being interviewed by CBS's Jeff Glor, saying, why don't you sit down and talk to these lovely people?
Do you see yourself under any circumstance talking to Hamas?
As long as they seek our destruction, what am I going to talk about? I mean, if somebody said, could you talk to Al-Qaeda? Would you have discussions with bin Laden? About what?
I ask only because, against all odds, the U.S. and North Korea seem to be on the verge of talking. So sometimes meetings that might be unimaginable end up happening.
You're right. It's happened to us with our Arab neighbors. But that's when you have leaders who decided that they abandoned the goal of war and destruction and annihilating the other side. And by the way, even what has happened in North Korea, that took place because of a very clear message, I think, that North Korea received, that the goal of destruction and aggression would be met with a very strong response.
There's Netanyahu basically setting this guy straight. You can't negotiate with people who want to kill you. And if you do negotiate with them, you do it by saying, hey, you know what? Draw. You draw, I will blow you away, which is essentially what Trump said to Kim Jong-un, while the same people in the press wailed and moaned and complained. There's all these myths that the press is selling, and it's just intolerable. But the underlying purpose of this is their hatred of Western culture, which is self-hatred, and self-hatred is hatred of God, and self-hatred and hatred of God always comes out in hatred of the Jews. That's the way it always works, okay? And the myths they're selling the myth that these are unarmed protesters that are just peaceful protests that are just coming out, and they're not. They're sending, they're sending fire over the side. They're using weapons. A Hamas guy, and Hamas is behind this, and Iran is behind Hamas. A Hamas official, Mahmoud al-Zahar, is on Arab television, and thank heavens for memory. Memory, MEMRI, translates what they're saying because we don't know about this. This is cut number 5, and leave the mic on so I can read it because you won't be able to hear what he's saying. The guy asks him, the interviewer asks this guy from Hamas about peaceful resistance, and here's the Hamas guy's answer. All right, play it, and leave my mic on. This is not peaceful resistance. Has the option of armed struggle diminished? No, on the contrary, it is growing and developing. That's clear. So when we talk about peaceful resistance, we're just deceiving the public. This is peaceful resistance bolstered by a military force and by security agencies, and enjoying tremendous popular support. As for Fatah's peaceful resistance, it consists of rallies, demonstrations, protests, pleas, and requests in order to improve the terms of the negotiations or to enable talks with the Israeli enemy. The deception does not fool the Palestinian public. And he goes on to say, he keeps saying, we're deceiving people. We call it peace, but we're deceiving people. They keep saying they're killing people at random. 5, 6, there have been like some 60 people killed, like 50 of them were Hamas people. So it's like somehow they're firing into this crowd, but just by luck. It's the luck of the Jews. You know how lucky Jews are, man. It's just the luck of the Jews. They just happen to be hitting high-level Hamas guys as they're firing into the crowd. It is the fact that the Jews represent the West. They represent it in their culture, and they represent it in their traditions that so inform who we are and what we believe. That is really what, it's really interesting. I saw Ethan Hawke's, really good actor, and he was on TV, and he was on one of the late night shows, Seth, what's his name, or whoever. Seth Meyers, thank you. He's talking about guns. What's the problem with gun control? And listen to what he says.
People have been talking so much about gun control in this country, and I noticed recently, like, if you put in a column every movie I ever did where I carry a gun and every movie where I don't, and my salary, like if I asked my father to do the math, I really think it would be about 92% to 8%.
Really?
And when I realized that, you realize how much our identity is wrapped up about what we want and how we see people and how hard it is to sell a movie without a gun. I mean, no wonder we're in turmoil over this subject.
And I'm sure if you look, and if there's a gun in the movie, I'm sure it's on the poster.
I know, that's for sure. But devil's advocate, I do think that if you tried to take the swords out of Shakespeare,
same thing,
it would fall apart.
Yeah, there you go.
Pretty quickly, you wouldn't.
They did a production back in the day where
swordless production,
and it was just guitars, and it did terribly.
Yeah. I don't think it.
Yeah.
So what Hawks is realizing there, not that I don't know that would ever occur to them to change their mind. What he's realizing there is this is part of life, and the culture reflects life. The culture reflects the life of the people. The people are the culture, not him. His job is to represent the culture. Ethan Hawks is not the culture. We are. The people are, and his job is just to represent us. And that's why movies with guns sell, because people need guns. They want to be able to defend themselves. They see themselves as heroes, as independent actors. They don't want to sit there and wait for the police to show up, because when when seconds count, the police are minutes away. And I think it's just amazing that it never occurs to Hollywood to say, maybe the people should speak to us instead of us talking to the people all the time. Maybe the people should be allowed to lecture us instead of us lecturing the people. They see themselves as the great wise men, but really it's their audience who should be informing them. That was what made the movies great in the old days, when you had a bunch of immigrant Jews who loved this country who said, what do the people want? We want to tell them that we're part of the country, that they should like us as well, but they were happy to make movies with Bing Crosby as a priest. They were happy to make movies with religious people, with patriotic people, because they understood that that's what the people were, that the people were the culture, and they were serving that culture by creating art, right? Our culture, as what they call culture, is really just a vehicle for elites to attack the people. And they never change their mind. Let's look at this for a minute. Yesterday was the day they memorialized police who had been killed in action. And Donald Trump went out and made a speech. Let's take a little bit of a look at this. One of the things the mother of a fallen officer was, it breaks your heart. The mother of a fallen officer was standing behind him, hugging him as he spoke, just like leaning her head against him and hugging him for the words that he was saying. That's the people. That's the culture. Listen to what he says.
They're praying for you. They're grieving with you and pledging to you that we will never forget our heroes, ever. This morning, I especially want to speak to the young sons and daughters who join us here today. I want you to know that your moms and dads were among the bravest Americans to ever live. When danger came, when darkness fell, when destruction loomed, they did not flinch. They were not afraid. They did not falter. They stared down danger, raced down alleys, chased down criminals, kicked down doors, and faced down evil. Brave.
I hear a lot of people on the left saying Donald Trump is stupid. Let me put it this way. If he's smart enough to say that, right, to say that simple thing, that the police are the good guys in a fight with evil and it makes them brave, then how stupid are they that they can't say it? You know what the top op-ed in the New York Times was today? This is the day after this, but it's obviously the day that they're reporting on this. To honor Eric Garner's life, reform the police. Now, Eric Garner was the guy who was accused of selling cigarettes off tax, and the police attacked him, and he resisted arrest, and the police wrestled him to the ground, and later he died after a cop put a stranglehold on him. Why would I honor that guy's life? I'm not even going to comment on whether they used deadly force or shouldn't have used the force. I wasn't there. I don't know. What am I going to honor that life? That's why. What is there in that life that I should honor? I don't understand that. Why is this the day when Eric Garner should come up? Why is this the day? Were there no cops? I mean, I know the answer to this question, but were there no cops murdered in New York at the instigation by killers inspired by the words of Barack Obama hating on the police? Were there no cops for them to talk about? We're going to honor the life of Eric Garner? Why? Why? I don't understand that. I do not understand it unless you hate the very culture that you're in. Unless instead of creating culture and being culture critical, which is fair and part of the job of the press, you are simply trying to destroy the culture. That's why the press is hated in this country, by the way. It's not because they're culture critical. It's not because they criticize. We all know the powerful have to be criticized. It's because they hate the very underlying structures of the country. I want to deal with one more story before we hit the break, which is the approval of Gina Haspel to run the CIA, because this is completely in keeping with the theme of the day, the theme that I'm talking about here. She has been approved by the Intel Committee, and she's basically guaranteed, she's won enough Democrat support where she will be, she'll be approved all the way. That was the last I heard. I don't think they've moved on to full approval yet. But anyway, she will be approved. And they were attacking her because she ran a station where terrorists were waterboarded. And I have said many times that I don't understand why, if you think a terrorist is staging an attack, he shouldn't be waterboarded. I wanted waterboarding jihadists to be part of the Olympics. You know, there would be like water, polo, and there would be water, dancing, and then there would be waterboarding jihadists, which I just thought was a great idea. And she was questioned by a number of Democrat senators about, she has said, I'm not doing this anymore. The rules changed. I'm following the rules. I'll just play one of these cuts because we're running short of time. Kamala Harris, she is the senator from California, so the quality that we send to this country. When we send you a senator, you are getting the very, very best quality Democrat lunatic. So she's questioning Gina Haspel, and she's asking her whether it's moral to torture somebody. And, Gina Haspel is kind of dancing around the question. And finally, I'm sorry, I want to go with the Jack Reed one. I'm sorry. Kamala Harris, everything I said about Kamala Harris is true, but I want to go with the Jack Reed one. He asks her the question, well, would it be moral if they did it to a CIA agent, which is such a stupid question. And here it is.
You have an operations officer who is captured. He's being waterboarded. I've asked you very simply, would you determine that to be immoral and something that should never be done, condoned in any way, shape, or form? Your response seems to be that civilized nations don't do it, but uncivilized nations do it, or uncivilized groups do it.
The United States does it.
A civilized nation was doing it until it was outlawed by this Congress.
Senator, I would never obviously support inhumane treatment of any CIA officers. We've lost CIA officers over the years to terrorists. I just gave an example. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed personally killed a Wall Street Journal correspondent and filmed that. I don't think there's any comparison between CIA officers serving their country, adhering to U.S. law, and terrorists who, by their very definition, are not following anybody's law.
You have to explain this to a Democrat. You have to explain it to them. You just have to explain that there's no comparison. It's the same thing with Israel. The other myth that they talk about, they say, why did Donald Trump move the embassy to Jerusalem without getting any concessions from Israel? And I agree. You know what concessions he should get from Israel? He should get the concession that they live by the rule of law. Oh, wait, they do that. He should get that they give women full rights. Oh, wait, they do that. He should get the concession that they give all religions full rights as opposed to all the Arab countries in the region. Oh, wait, they do that. We don't need concessions from them because they're not doing anything wrong. And they just can't figure this out. They cannot figure it out because they are not the culture. We're the culture. They are at war with us. The culture war is actually a war against we, the people.